Hi, this is Brett Ingram, award-winning digital marketer and entrepreneur. And today, I want to share with you 8 questions that help entrepreneurs prioritize and get more done. We all have 24 hours in a day. As entrepreneurs, we often wish that we had more, right? But unfortunately, that's it. So that's all we have to work with. So we need to be smart about how we use our time. We have to be able to prioritize. We have to be able to automate. We have to be able to outsource. And we have to be able to delegate so we can get everything done that we need to do in order to grow and succeed. But when we're in the battle every day, head down, working, doing everything that we need to do and getting pulled in 100 different directions, it's easy to get overwhelmed in the moment and get stuck not knowing how to get out of that cycle. If we ask ourselves a few questions, we can actually regain our clarity and our focus, and we can optimize our businesses to run efficiently while getting our own workload down to a reasonable focused amount of high leverage activities. And that's really the key. So here are 9 questions for entrepreneurs that help us prioritize, get more done, and ultimately reduce overwhelm all at the same time. The first question is, what am I spending the bulk of my time on? Now, it might even sound funny or counterintuitive at first. I mean, of course, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. But the irony is, and the interesting part about this is, when they've done studies about entrepreneurs and the way that we spend our time, what they've found is a lot of people don't really have a clear sense. Because it's always roll up the sleeves and do whatever needs to be done, there's not a great accounting for exactly how we're spending our time. And because we have such a finite amount of it, it's super important that we're using it in the best and highest leverage places possible. So if we don't know how we're spending our time, or we sort of think and, oh, well, I did a little of this and a little bit of that, but that isn't really going to cut it. What we need to do, if necessary, is actually keep a journal for a few days or for a week. And everything that we do that takes more than, say, a couple of minutes, more than 2 or 3 minutes, we want to actually write those things down. We want to chart it so we understand, and when we look back, we have a really clear sense of exactly where we're spending our time, exactly what we're spending our time on, and where the bulk of our energy and effort is going. Because the interesting thing about memory, I always used to believe, well, I'm a smart enough guy, right? I mean, I can remember how to do this or how to do that or what I did with this. And the funny thing is, it's just like when you're trying to find the keys for your car and you can't figure out where you put them or remember where you left them, right? You obviously know where you put them because it's wherever you put them down. But yet, for some reason, we can't remember. Well, the same idea applies to business and entrepreneurship. The fact is, there are things where I've figured out a process for doing something and I did it and I didn't document it. And I said, well, of course I'm always going to remember this. But I get distracted, I go on to something else, and then when I have to solve that problem again or do that process again, I can't remember my best practice for it. So I have to go and relearn it again. And then after I relearn it, oh yeah, now I remember. But that's a waste of time, and it's because I'm relying too much on my own memory instead of on actual documentation and fact. So there is no simpler way to do it or any shortcut other than actually track where we're spending our time. This is the first step, because if we don't understand where we're spending our time, the feeling of overwhelm is never going to go away. We're always going to feel like there's more stuff to do in a day than what we can actually get done. So that's the first step, is get our baseline, figure out where we are and where we're actually spending the bulk of our time. Once we know that, the first question that we want to ask ourselves is everything I'm doing 100% necessary to grow my business? Now, when I say grow my business, obviously if you're answering customer emails or whatever, maybe that isn't technically growing the business directly, but it needs to be done because we have to take care of our customers. So anything that's germane or relevant or important to the business and its success is basically what we're talking about here when we say grow our business. And what we want to first do is identify Are all the things that we're doing completely necessary? Again, it might sound a little counterintuitive or silly, but you'll be surprised by how many things we end up doing out of habit that we just do over and over again, only to realize later, because we aren't assessing it, it was a waste of time or we never needed to do it. I'll give you a perfect example of this. In my email marketing element of my business, or, arm of my business, one of the things that I do is for all the products that I've created and launched, I have an individual list for all the customers for that particular product. Well, some of these things are a few years old. And just by sort of force of habit, on a daily basis when I'm doing my emails and I'm sending them out, I send them to each of the lists. It doesn't take a lot of time for each individual one, but when there's a bunch of them, it does take a little bit of time. Well, I was just doing this in a robotic fashion. And at one point I realized, some of these lists are so inactive that I'm literally getting like 1 or 2 clicks from the entire mail that's going out. Now, they're not big lists, but nonetheless, there's no value in that. That's literally just a waste of my time to send out something that's going to get 1 or 2 clicks on it. And so it's important to really sort of assess each of the things that we're doing and ask, are all of those that important to the business? That's the first thing. And then once we know that, we want to try to figure out, what do I want to spend more time on? And what do I want to spend less time on? There might be things that we intuitively would like to spend more time on, but in this context, what we're talking about are things that we think are higher leverage or more important for growing the business. If we're answering customer emails, then we aren't creating marketing campaigns, or we aren't, creating content that's going to help build our brand in the online space. And so, those are all things that we want to figure out. Okay, let's pretend for a minute, let's play in the sandbox, and let's say we're designing our schedule today and we have absolutely nothing on it. Where would I want to spend most of my time? And you can ask the same critical question of that as well. Is that the highest use of my time, or is it just fun? I mean, I might want to spend 3 of my hours watching TV or playing video games, but obviously that isn't anything that's going to grow my business or be entrepreneurship. Now, that said, full disclosure here, one of the things that is super important is that we do have downtime. And so if we're working, when I was trying to build things up initially, I had periods of time where I was working 14, 16, 18 hours a day. And so in those particular time, to say I wanted to spend an hour relaxing or doing this was totally valid and valuable, and in fact important, because if we don't unplug and recharge our own batteries, we'll burn out. And so in that context, it made sense. But in general, what I mean is, when what would we want to spend more time on in the business that's going to help it grow, that's going to help get it to the next level? Oftentimes, as the entrepreneur, the CEO, the owner, the visionary, whatever you want to call it, we're the ones that have the ability to drive that. And so if we're spending our time on customer support and, packaging and things like that, then we aren't spending it on time on places where it could be better used. And so we want to identify, where do we want to spend more time? And the flip side of that coin, what do we want to spend less time on? There also are specific things that we're doing that we want to spend less time on. There are specific things that we're doing. I don't want to go in and organize my email inbox. I find that very tedious. I don't want to do it. A lot of the stuff in there is junk anyway. So that's something that, it might be an indulgent activity to click and see, like, oh, who sent me emails? But the reality of it is, for me, I want to spend less time on that. It's not a high leverage activity. It's something that somebody, it's a relatively low skill thing that somebody can do once they know what's important to bring to our attention and not. And so what do we want to spend more time on? What do we want to spend less time on? 2 super important questions in terms of understanding, where it all fits in the prioritization chain. What we're trying to do is get to a place where we understand what our highest level priorities are, and we're able to focus on those, right? That's where we're going to get the most bang for our buck. The next question is, what other things would I do if I had more time, right? So the first part of this was all right, what am I already doing? What do I want to do more? What do I want to do less, right? Is it all important? What do I want to do more? What do I want to do less? This is, okay, let's again pretend we're in the sandbox. We have nothing on our calendar today. What things would I do if I had more time? So whatever it is, these in general are going to be things that we're not doing at all, or not doing very much at all, because we aren't able to get to them. So it's not so much stuff we're already doing that we want to do more. We've already covered that. It's more, what things can I not get to? You know, I always have that list of sort of arm's length thing that are on my to-do list or on my nice to investigate list, and I, have a hard time getting to it. Those are the kinds of things we're talking about here. Because once we start to pull this into full focus and we understand what the other things are that we would do if we had more time, what this and where we're spending our time, it's going to be very easy. It's going to become very clear in terms of, what our priorities are. It's funny. It reminds me a little bit of those ads where it's like, it's such an easy decision. It's easier than this. And they've got like a little league baseball game, and there's Derek Jeter standing in as one of the potential like pinch hitters, a bunch of all these kids. And they're like, yeah, we'll take him to come hit. And it's like, it's even easier than that. That's the kind of thing. When we prioritize, when we have our full list, it becomes so easy to see the things that are clear. We're like, wow, why didn't I do that before? I mean, obviously, if I'm sitting here responding to emails and I could have been, building the brand and doing this, it makes total sense, right? So sometimes it just takes the process of going through the questions and fleshing all this out so we really see it clearly. The next question is, are the other things that I would do higher impact in growing my business than what I'm doing now? This is a really important question, and it sort of is an addendum to the one before it. Because we can't just assume, because there's something we would rather be doing, that is going to be a higher priority. There might be things in our business that we feel indulgent pleasure from. There's nothing better if things are going well than checking your stats, right? Going in and checking the number of leads or the number of sales you generated today. But in reality, those stats are there whether you check them or not. So we need to have an understanding of that, of course, but we don't need to be clicking refresh on the page, every 30 minutes. It's just not a high priority activity, because the fact of the matter is it feels good. And it's exciting to see, activity coming in. But at the same time, there's things that we could be doing that are far higher impact than that. And so we want to assess there the impact of the various things. So when we have a list of all the stuff we're doing, we have all of the list of stuff that we want to do less and want to do more, all the stuff that we would add to this list if we could. And now we have sort of an idea of where those things are prioritized in importance for growing our business. We're really starting to bring this into focus in terms of what is going to make the most sense. The next question that we want to ask when we've gotten to that point is, can anything I'm doing be automated with technology? Technology is the low-hanging fruit, baby. I mean, this is honestly the thing that we want to do the most. If there's anything that we can do where we can automate something, it makes life so much easier. It's so cheap, relatively speaking, and because it's automatic, it takes it off our plate really easily. When I was creating one of the graphic design products that I had, one of the things that I needed for visual elements is I needed essentially like cutout graphics where it was like a photo with a transparent background. So it might be like a business person or whatever. But the idea was I wanted the customers to be able to use those and put them on the designs they were making. So if it had a background to it, it wouldn't work. It would cover the whole design. If it was the cutout of just the person, they could paste it right on top of there and it would look great because it's a cutout and it fits seamlessly. Well, before the newest technology stuff that was out there, now there's 100 tools that do this. But I was actually going into like Photoshop and needing to clear out, or having someone do this, clear out all the pixels around the various images to try to make these things transparent. And it was very labor intensive and take a lot of time. And I knew I only needed a few hundred of these, but even still, it was hours and hours of work. I finally decided, you know what, maybe there is a faster way to do this. And I went on and found, I think it's called Photo Room. And it's basically this tool. First I used, there was a different tool first, Background Clipper or something like that. And that one was good. But then I found Photo Room, which was even better, and it was free because it does it automatically. You upload the photo and it automatically removes the background. I was like, oh, if I knew about this, it was so easy. It was so great. I mean, literally, I started doing this in 30 seconds a photo instead of like 12 minutes each. I mean, I literally say if I did 10 photos a day, it was a savings of an hour to 2 hours for me or someone on my team. And so that's how valuable the automation with technology can be. The first thing we want to do is investigate whether or not there's a solution out there. A lot of times there is. By the way, getting back to the email inboxing, there's solutions for that in technology also, that you can actually train. They learn your habits based on what you do from different emails that come in from different people and automatically sort them into buckets or delete them. So you have to train it a little bit. There's a little bit of a learning curve, but once you've done that, it does that for you automatically. Awesome, right? And so technology is the low-hanging fruit. It's the cheapest option usually, the fastest, easiest option. And it's something that once we get it set up, we can just let it run forever. And so always look for an automated technology solution if possible. If there isn't a solution there, the next question we can ask is, could someone else do it for me? Or can I teach it to somebody else? So if it's graphic design, there's a million graphic designers out there. You can go on Upwork.com, Fiverr.com, and you can just post your job, let them know what you want, show them some samples, ask them for some samples of their work, boom, hire somebody to get it done, right? And so that's fairly straightforward and simple. So if it's any sort of general task like that, that isn't going to be that hard to find somebody to do. When it comes to things that are specific to the business, it may be a little bit more challenging. There might be something a little bit more nuanced. You know, one of the products that I did years ago was a software product where basically what we did was we set up these membership sites for customers. We had a script and we would set it up on their domain and get it all running and everything else. And it was like an 18 or 22 step process. And when we started doing it, you know, we were all doing it in-house. Like our team was literally doing all of the installs. But the problem was we sold so much of it that we had a backlog and we weren't able to get to the orders fast enough. And it was making people really frustrated and angry. So one of the things that initially the reason we were doing it all in-house is because the thought was there's no way that somebody else could do this, right? It's not just a matter of installing a script like a programmer could do. It has all these nuanced steps to it. Part of it is graphic design, part of it is this, part of it is that. And so there was no way to just outsource it like that. But when I sat back and thought, and I asked myself this question, but could it be taught? I said, of course it could. If people on my team can be taught how to do it, of course somebody else can be taught how to do it too as an outsourcer. It might take a little bit more time. You might get a couple of people initially that you hire that aren't that great. But in the context of either losing sales and having angry customers, you know, and having to give refunds or getting this done, what made more sense? Of course, it was to teach somebody how to do it and create a process for that so I could teach someone how to do it. And the ancillary benefit of that is if you have to create a process to teach somebody, that process can be used over and over again. And the beautiful part about that is it can also be optimized. If new things come to light or new steps or new shortcuts or ways to do things better, those can be integrated into the process that can be updated. So it's ongoing, evolving, and getting better and more efficient as you go. So we want to ask the question, you know, and brainstorm this and think of possibility, not of all the reasons someone couldn't do it. Could someone else do it for me, or can I teach it to somebody else? Once we figure that part out, it's what is the cost to get someone else to do it? So, okay, so we know we got somebody else who could do this. If it's graphic design, that's pretty easy. We can look, we can see what their hourly rates are. And again, that's pretty simple. If it's admin assistant, same kind of deal. You can figure that out really easily. If it's a little bit more nuanced and complex, well, that might take some doing. We might need to post a couple of job posts, evaluate that, talk to some people, and see what they would want on an hourly basis or per project basis to do it. But it's important to have that numerical value So we understand it's going to take them X amount of hours at Y dollars per hour. So this is what it's going to cost. And the reason that that's really important is because the follow-up to that question is, does the value of what I would do instead outweigh it? Well, there's no way we can determine that if we don't know what it costs us. So the minute that we go in and we evaluate what the actual cost would be to us, now we have an understanding if we can weigh that. Okay, $16 an hour or $96 for this project, but I'd be able to build a brand that would bring in 1,000 new leads a month that are worth, $500 each to us. Well, I mean, obviously that's a no-brainer, right? Sometimes it's going to be a little bit tighter than that. But the fact is, a lot of times it's just a matter of thinking these things through, and the answers become really obvious. The overwhelm disappears, and what we should do and the path forward becomes really, really clear. Because once we have a clear understanding of what we're doing every day, and we find leverage points within that, we can eliminate, automate, outsource, and delegate so we can focus on what matters most. And we can do this over and over again, anytime and every time we're feeling overwhelmed. So this isn't a one and done deal. We do this right now if that's the way we feel. If in 6 months we find ourselves overwhelmed, we do it again. And we again come up with another set of things. So eventually, as we keep doing this, we evolve into highest leverage, highest priority tasks and activities that build our business faster than anything else. And we delegate and outsource and automate everything else or eliminate it. So that way we are able to build the fastest, biggest, most profitable business in the most efficient way possible. The takeaway here is that there's no such thing as the entrepreneur who's bored, right? I mean, at least I've never met one. We all have so much to do and so many ideas that even if we're not overwhelmed with what we have to do, we're overwhelmed with ideas of what we could do. That at times it can feel overwhelming and impossible. But when we step back and we evaluate what we're actually spending our time on, and then look at all the possible ways to eliminate, automate, outsource, and delegate, we can regain our time and use it on the most fulfilling, productive, and profitable activities for our business.